All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SPED Community of Practice. For those of you who I was unable to notify, we did have a little scheduling glitch where we switched our December and January presenters. So we do have Mercy presenting for December on prior written notice. And Mercy is one of the members of the OPI School Improvement Specialist team who monitors IEPs. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mercy and let her introduce herself to everybody. And please feel free to ask any questions or put something in chat if you have questions. We're happy to help. Okay, Mercy.
Thanks so much, Anne. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I apologize for the scheduling switch, but we are going to be talking about the riveting, very exciting edge of the seat prior written notice today. I know everybody has just been dreaming about this training. In all reality, prior written notice, we see a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of questions pop up about prior written notice. So we just thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to share this training with all of you. I'm going to try not to talk too fast, but this training without any questions typically takes an hour. So I want to make sure that we touch every component of the training today. So if I am talking too fast, you just throw it out in the chat and Anne will tell me to pump my brakes a little bit. So let's just dive right into the exciting world of prior written notice. So what is it and why is it required? Prior written notice is a required written explanation of basically just the changes a school district wants to take, whether they propose or refuse to take action in a child's IEP or evaluation report. A lot of people get hung up on the word prior, thinking that it means you have to fill this out and give it to a parent or guardian prior to the IEP or evaluation report meeting. That is not what it means. It means that you're giving notice to any changes prior to the implementation of those changes. So the school district has to provide a written notice to the guardian or an adult student whenever it is making changes to the identification of a student, the evaluation of a student, the education placement, or any provision of FAPE for a student. So that's why it is very important that it is filled out correctly. And we will dive into all of that through this entire training. The first major thing about prior written notice is it not only is a great document to back up your decisions if you ever go to due process, but it's also just basic terms for a parent or a guardian to understand the content of an education plan or an evaluation report. And with that being said, they should be in very understandable language. You want to make sure you avoid the numerous acronyms that we just love in the education world. You want to basically make sure that the general public could understand what you're saying in a prior written notice. Make it very, very understandable. Because I can attest there are plenty of times you put things in an IEP or an evaluation report, especially, that parents aren't going to understand all the ins and outs of that. So the prior written notice, we want to make sure that we include that in an evaluation report, an IEP, and we also have a standalone form on our website. And I will give you some examples of when you may use a standalone prior written notice form throughout the training. Down on the bottom.
Do you want me to start with that first poll question?
You know, and let's skip that because I meant for that to come across before this first slide right here. So I apologize for that, but we can skip that. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Down here on the bottom is a direct link with this presentation where you can find that standalone form also on forms and guides on our website. The purpose of a prior written notice is to notify and ensure parents that they understand the district's proposal or refusal for any action prior to the implementation of a document. You want to make sure that you offer parents an opportunity to ask questions or offer suggestions in regard to their child's education. And that's what the prior written notice does. It also is a great place to document what the district plans to do, why they are doing it, how they came to that decision in case something ever does get taken to due process. When is a prior written notice required? These are just some outlier cases of when you want to make sure that a prior written notice is required in your documentation, when it's not just a renewal of an IEP or an evaluation report. There is some federal guidance down on the bottom that backs up our state guidance that we are sharing with you on this slide. You want to include it with cases that an IEP process is contentious, and that the district, after repeat attempts, is unable to finish the IEP or obtain consent from parents. You also want to include it when a district wants to initiate or initiate a proposal regarding identification, assessment, or education placement for a student in relation to FAPE. And you also want to do one when a student is graduating from school with a general diploma. Another example when it is required is when a district receives notice of a due process complaint. And anytime the initial provision of special education and related services, a parent revokes consent for those services. And that's a really great example of when you would use that standalone prior written notice form in AIM. I forgot to mention, you guys throw any questions out in the chat because Anne is my eyes on that. And I definitely don't want anybody to forget their questions by the time we get through this. In a draft IEP or evaluation report, should the prior written notice section be included? So should you complete the prior written notice before you hold an IEP meeting or an evaluation report? Go ahead and give a thumbs up or a thumbs down in the chat as an answer to that question. Thumbs up if you think it should be included in a draft, or thumbs down if you think it should not. Just want to get a general consensus of what the team thinks.
Hey, Mercy, quick question. Where do we find the thumbs down if everyone doesn't know where that is located in Zoom?
Oh, so if you open up your chat, there's the little emoji, and there should be, I guess I should have done a smiley face or you have to scroll down for the thumbs down. I'm making it real complicated for you non-tech people.
Right now we have 2 thumbs down and we have my thumbs up because I wanted to make sure it was working. So
Oh, perfect, perfect, perfect.
we got 3 thumbs down.
Wonderful. Well, Anne, you are incorrect. So you do not want to fill out that prior written notice section in your draft IEPs or evaluation reports because this suggests predetermination without any parent participation or input whatsoever. And just in our state alone, oh, I'm sorry, I got to re-click on this. And these are state decisions that our state, Montana, has cited with the parents that the pre-filled out prior written notice sections is resulting in predetermination of a student's placement. So while it's really tempting to go into an IEP meeting and having everything filled out and all your ducks in a row, you want to make sure you don't do that. Just like you wouldn't make a predetermination on if a student qualifies for ESY prior to a meeting, you want to make sure that this portion of the IEP is filled out during the meeting. So next, we're going to break it down. We're going to go through all the components of a prior written notice, what they should include, what they look like, and why that information needs to be in there. There are, let's see, I believe 8 editors in an IEP prior written notice and an ER prior written notice. So the first thing you're going to come across are these check boxes. And I have seen this be completed wrong on a lot of evaluation prior written notice and IEP prior written notice, just through my experience looking through files. And it can be kind of confusing and pretty tricky. So the first two boxes you'll see here, those are the two boxes you'll see when you pull up an evaluation report, and it includes a prior written notice. And the last two boxes pertain to an IEP's prior written notice. So what are they for, and when do you check those boxes? So on an evaluation report, the first box says initiation or change in the evaluation of a student. You're going to want to check this box for every initial evaluation, because you're initiating or changing a student's education plan based on that. And you're going to want to check this box during a reevaluation if a student is exited because they no longer meet a disability qualification. Otherwise, you're going to leave that box unchecked for an evaluation, which would basically be a reevaluation. That next box is initiation or change in the identification of a student. So basically, anytime you do an initial evaluation or you're doing a reevaluation, you're going to always check this box, because anytime you do that, the team is determining a disability criteria, or they're assessing any aid to programming decisions for that student. The student might be exiting or no longer needing service, or you could be adding or deleting a disability category, such as developmental delay, when a student ages out of that. So that's when you check that box, which is always. This trips people up. So if you have coworkers and you know they're doing a lot of evaluations and things like that, please share these training materials with them or any of your other case managers at your district, because it's very helpful information. The next two boxes are in relation to the IEP prior written notice. That first box is the initiation or change in the education placement of the student. You're going to check this box for every initial IEP, and you can check this box when you're changing the location of any special education service. So if they're going from regular education setting to a special education setting, or any kind of alternate setting, such as homebound services. So how do you know that you have to check that box? I threw in some resources here from court cases, and down on the bottom, those cases, just once again, they back up our state guidance that we are sharing with you guys. So why you would check that box, an example would be that you have a student that's in a self-contained classroom and you want to move them to a resource room. Would you be changing their placement and needing to check that box? Of course you would, because a child's education in a self-contained classroom looks extremely different from that of a resource room. Just take their interaction with any of their non-disabled peers, for example. The material, the teaching material is different. The teaching style would be different. They're in a larger class setting. So you just want to take into account what a change in placement would do to their education. And a good rule of thumb is, if you don't have to make any changes to a student's IEP, then most likely you wouldn't have to change this box on their IEP. Now, I can tell you from experience.
Mercy,
yes.
you have a question.
Oh, wonderful.
The question is that just changing placement or changing service time?
This is changing placement. If you change service time, you're also going to want to check, you wouldn't check this box because this box is just for placement, but you would want to fill out a prior written notice if you're changing service time or service minutes, because you're initiating a change in their education. That would be the next box I'm going to talk about. This is still that first box. That's a good question though.
Can I ask like further, but if you're changing service time, wouldn't you be changing the placement, just because like you could have someone that's maybe only 30 minutes in the SPED room and now you're increasing it to maybe 300 minutes in the special ed room? Or am I just kind of seeing it too far?
Yes, because you're correct. So I'm sorry, I thought you just meant like if you're changing like 20 minutes of speech time to 30 minutes of speech time. No, so that would be the opposite. You're taking a child that is being more of a resource or gen ed setting, and you're moving them into a or like a more contained education setting. So yes, you would check that box for that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. I'm glad you did.
One more question.
Yes.
If I can add to that, what if you are removing, for example, math goals? So you are no longer serving them math goals within the resource room, and they have met those goals and you've shown through data, they're no longer receiving math services. Wouldn't that be a change in placement as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on this before we move to the next box? All right, that second box, you would always check that box. That is initiation or change in the provisions of FAPE to a student. Why would you always check that box? Because any addition, deletion, or any kind of change you're making in a student's IEP is going to ultimately change their free and appropriate public education. There is nothing you can change in an IEP that will not affect that. So that box will always be checked. A good rule of thumb is just remember, second box, it should just automatically be checked. I'm not entirely sure why. I wish we could make an editor for that, but we can't because that would be predetermining, right? So next, we're going to jump into the 7 required components of the prior written notice. So these are the 7 editors that you'll find in a prior written notice. And I can tell you right now, there's 2 of them that number 4 and number 5 that we often see NA or they're just left blank. If you went into due process and you left something blank or did a blanketed statement like no other factors were considered, does that make it appear that the district did their due diligence in providing free and appropriate education to a student? It does not. You do not want to leave something blank ever, with the exception of the graduation component of the IEP, which is a totally different training. So let's jump in here and we'll just go through each editor. The first editor is basically what did you discuss and who made the decisions? So that first one says a description of the action proposed or refused by the district. I'm going to do a sidebar and let you know you guys are going to get really tired of me saying action proposed or refused by the end of this training. Excuse me. This is where you summarize any of the actions that the district decided to take or they decide to deny. And you want to make sure that you are very specific and you describe what those actions were. You want to include issues related to the identification, evaluation, or IEP, or any provision of FAPE to the student. You can list multiple actions in this editor. You don't have to just pick one, and you shouldn't just pick one. A good way of looking at the prior written notice is it's a very detailed, just note-taking of everything that was said, and you just have to make sure you put it all in the correct box. So you want to list and identify each meeting participant in this as well in this editor. The reason being is, once again, you want to be able to defend yourself and say, we had a proper rock star team assembled for this meeting. We all participated. I solely did not make any decisions for this student's education. Another reason why it's really great you document it there is because, say we are monitoring your school district and somebody didn't sign a signature page, we can go in there and we can see that they attended and see that it was just an oversight. It's never a bad thing to document who's in a meeting multiple times, and the prior written notice is a great place to do that. The second box is the why. Why did the district make those decisions? Again, you want this to be very specific in general statements. You don't want to just put, this is part of the student's annual review, so we renewed an IEP. You want to explain why the district proposed or refused certain things in an IEP. So for an evaluation report example, you could say a statement such as the student's assessments and corresponding criteria checklist indicate that the student has a disability in the following categories. From this section, a parent should be able to pick it up, read it, and understand and determine exactly why the district did what they did. And they should be able to come to you and not be confused about what you discussed in the meeting, especially for evaluation meetings, especially for parents who are new to the IEP and special education world. those meetings can be extremely confusing. So just make sure you're explaining it in a way that parents understand why the district is making the decisions that they are. The third editor are the tools. These are the tools that the district uses in order to make those decisions, why they decided to do something and why they decided not to do something else. You want to identify all the evaluation procedures, assessments by name. A date would even be great too. Records or reports used as a basis for the proposed or refused action. For an evaluation report, it's very simple. You just put in all the assessments that you did in the evaluation, right? So classroom-based assessments, a psychology assessment, if you did that, or psychological, sorry, I said psychology. And you want to list the specific names of those assessments and a brief summary in layman terms, right? By no means do you want to copy everything that the speech pathologist put on their evaluation, on an evaluation report, and put that into the prior written notice. But on the same note, I think, and I don't mean to pick on speech pathologists, but I think all of us at one point have read the findings on an evaluation report from a speech pathologist and thought, I don't think I'm reading English anymore, right? So you can guarantee that parents are also reading that and just super confused and want to know what's happening with their child and why. So make sure you put it in language that they can understand. On an IEP, you can use things like their current grades, their current assessments that you might be doing with them, and their performance as it's documented in the PLAF statement, and just make it all align and look really nice, and parents will be able to understand, yeah, my student's doing this in math, and now I understand why their goals are the way that they are, without shifting through all the data that you put in your IEP, PLAFs, and MAGs. It's super helpful for parents to just a quick overview on the prior written notice. Box number 4 is the one that gives me nightmares. Box number 4 and box number 5. These are the other options. So these are the boxes that 4 and 5 are, like I said, the ones that are often left with just an NA or did not apply. I can guarantee that no case manager or team member has ever sat in a meeting where a parent didn't recommend something and they said no, right? So for instance, say a parent comes to, again, a speech pathologist, I'm picking on them so bad today, and says, I am concerned, this is during their IEP meeting, I'm concerned that my child isn't wiping completely during toileting. Can I request a one-on-one aid when they go to the restroom to ensure that this is being done? Right? No district is going to say, yeah, we're going to hire a one-on-one aid for your child to do that, when the case manager can easily say your child doesn't pose any cognitive delays that's going to warrant a one-on-one aid during this. They have their gross motor skills. We will consider giving them a verbal reminder from staff across their settings to ensure that they are toileting correctly. And we can revisit this again if it poses to be a problem, right? That would be a perfect thing that would consider to be put in this box, this editor box for other options. I know for a fact that any teacher that puts NA in that box just didn't understand what they were supposed to put in the box. So any unique circumstances, you're going to want to put in there. If for some bizarre reason you have a parent that just isn't talking whatsoever in a meeting, you want to explain why there is a unique circumstance and there are no other options that were considered. Sometimes you might get like a foster parent that maybe doesn't know this kid very well and might not have a lot of things to say. So if that is the case, you want to document it very, very clearly. Number 5 is the other box of nightmares. It's called other factors. This is where you would describe any additional factors that were relevant to the district's proposal or refusal. This could be unique things like health concerns or safety concerns, communication concerns, or just any general parent input. For instance, a student might have sleep apnea and might need to take periodic rest throughout the day just because of fatigue. You'd want to document that under other factors. If for some reason there are no other factors, which is very, very rare, like I'm saying, make a statement explaining that this requirement was considered, but under the particular set of circumstances, nothing was brought up in the meeting. And make sure you document that really well. The next part isn't really an editor, it's included. Parts 6 and 7 are included in the prior written notice. They are not something that you can change. The first one is those procedural safeguard statements that just inform parents where they can obtain the procedural safeguards. And you want to make sure as a district that if you're doing an initial referral for evaluation and an initial IEP, that it's the district's responsibility to make sure that those parents have that copy of procedural safeguards during that initial process, just so that they know that they can that they exist and what they are, and just ensure that they know that it's support for them, just making sure that they understand the process of special education. That second part is just general context for parents to obtain any assistance with the prior written notice or just IEP or the process in general. That includes us at the Montana Office of Public Instruction and the Montana Empowerment Center. I don't think there's any questions on 7 and 8. So when should you send prior written notice to a parent? A school must give parents written notice anytime it adds, changes, or denies education services to their children or wants to change a child's placement. So when a school wants to conduct an initial evaluation of a student, when a school says no to a parent request, whether that be for an evaluation service placement or say they suggest assistive technology, you really, really want to make sure that you are documenting that with a prior written notice and that the team is convening for that, even if it's something that they call in later outside of a meeting and request it over the phone. You want to make sure that a prior written notice is filled out for that. You want to do one when a school wants to change how it identifies a child's disability. We often see those for, like I was saying, like developmental delay, or if a child is being exited out of a service. When the school wants to change a child's education placement, we talked about that, whether it's going from gen ed to special ed or self-contained to a resource room, etc. Anytime a school wants to reduce, add, or change any way the service minutes for a child's education. And that's just a note, even like I said, even if a parent does this over a phone call, a meeting should be held where the prior written notice is filled out and the whole team is aware of what you discussed with the parent. So those standalone prior written notice forms are wonderful. And I get phone calls probably every month asking why that's on there and when to use it. So that prior written notice form is built into the evaluation report and IEP. But like I said, there are examples from when you wouldn't have that you would use the standalone form. When a district refuses to conduct an evaluation, right, because this district's refusing or proposing change, so you want to fill one out. Graduation with a regular diploma, and you can use it whenever you have to send out that 15-day letter if a IEP is not included with that letter. You want to make sure that the prior written notice is sent out so parents know. And just in case you do not know what it looks like, we have graciously provided this beautiful example of the standalone form for you. So the timeline for a prior written notice, the federal guidelines just says a reasonable time before any action is implemented. OPI doesn't define the timeline either. We all know in the state of Montana that the IEP is implemented in our AIMS system the day after a meeting, but the district has a responsibility to ensure that that is not implemented until the IEP or amendment is parental approved or a 15-day letter is utilized. So some tips when you're conducting a prior written notice, whether it be for an IEP, an ER, or just a standalone form, whoever is facilitating that meeting should not be the prior written notice recorder. It's very hard to make sure you're including all the information and you're not missing anything for the prior written notice if you're also trying to conduct the meeting. I'm speaking from experience here. So you want to consider having another team member be the recorder. And if they're not comfortable typing in a meeting either, they can write it out and upload it, or they can type it into AIM after the meeting, whatever works best. You want to always remember that the prior written notice is just a wonderful thing to positively drive your meetings. It helps parents feel like their voices were heard, which they always should be, right? Because they have a right to their child's education. And it's just a wonderful way to just recap your entire meeting and all the things that you discussed. Just remember that if you have a complex meeting with 12 meeting members, a parent, an advocate, 3 other people that I haven't mentioned, that means you're going to have a really complex prior written notice. So make sure that you always take time, whether it's a complex meeting or not, to review it, finalize it, and make sure it's all put together before you lock your IEP or your evaluation report. Oh, sorry. So common questions. Sorry, my computer is lagging here. Common question, and you guys saw the answer, but who's responsible for completing the prior written notice? That would be the school district. Like I said, we don't at the agency dictate that the case manager has to be the one that takes the notes, or the administrator takes the notes for the prior written notice, but it is the district as a whole who is responsible for completing that. The next question, I want you guys to answer the following questions. You can answer in the chat. If an ER and an IEP meeting occur consecutively, are 2 separate prior written notices required to be complete? Yes or no? Well, you guys are so smart. What do you need me for? Yes, you want to make sure that you do one for each meeting, because like I said, they're included in those documents as their own standalone. So there is no skipping it. Not to mention, if you tried to do them both in one, that would be one confusing prior written notice. So you want to make sure that you're completing the editors for their individual documents. How does a district document the prior written notice when it refuses to take an action that the parent has requested? This one, let's not answer in the chat because it's kind of hefty. But if you're holding a meeting, an IEP meeting, and a parent requests something and the district refuses it, you already know by this training that there's an editor box to document that. Now, if a parent makes a request outside of the meeting, once again, whether it be a phone call or just in person during pickup, you want to make sure that you hold a meeting and you do a standalone prior written notice form. And just to ensure that there's no contention between a parent that feels like their voice isn't being held by you saying, well, we need to hold a meeting for that. Make sure you tell them, well, we have a wonderful team that backs the education of your child, and I cannot solely be responsible for making this decision. So let's all meet and we can discuss it as a team. And no parent is going to say no to that. If a placement change occurs due to disciplinary action, when is a prior written notice required to be provided to the parent? Go ahead and answer that one in the chat.
You're getting a
Good.
variety of responses there, Mercy.
Good job, you guys. So Chad, you hit the nail on the head with that. He says prior to the disciplinary action. So, and Megan, you're right, within reasonable time. So you don't want to send out a prior written notice a month after a disciplinary action. So you want to make sure that you send it after a decision has been made about the placement change, but before the student's placement is changed. So after the decision has been made, this kid's doing this, we've got to move him into a more contained environment because of his actions and he's harming others and himself. But you want to make sure that you have that meeting and fill out that prior written notice before you move that child into a more contained setting. Good job. In casual conversation, a parent requests an assistive technology evaluation. Do I need a prior written notice? Yes or no? Chad's happy. The answer is yes. Good job. A parent request should always be considered a formal request and include a team review and prior written notice. And once again, we linked some OSEP federal little cases down there to back that guidance that we share with our state. This next slide is super helpful for you guys, and man, I killed it. Can I just say we're almost done? I'm giving myself a pat on the back here. Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah, you deserve it.
Thank you. Thank you. This slide is really helpful for every case manager and every director. So when we conduct our monitoring process, these are the 8 components that we look at just for compliance of the prior written notice. So we make sure to see that it's present, the actions proposed or refused, one of those boxes, the boxes are marked completely and adequately, those 2 boxes. Parents were given reasonable time before the district implemented action, a description of specific proposed or refused actions, an explanation of why, a description of each evaluation or assessment tool that was used, a description of other factors and other options. So basically every component, everything that we just covered in this training, if you make sure you fill them out and you fill them out correctly, then you've hit the nail on the head for all 8 of these components that we monitor for compliance. So it's pretty easy, pretty simple, not as scary as a lot of people think prior written notice can be. So this is just a helpful thing. Once again, share it with your coworkers, share it with your case managers. If we have any directors on the call, it's a really helpful little tool that we use. Here at the end, we just have some additional resources for you guys, a Q&A, the Teacher Learning Hub. We have courses up there called the SPED series. It really touches base on the prior written notice in the Writing Complete IEPs series course, but you have to fill one out when you start just with the referral and evaluation SPED series course, which is the first one. So if you ever feel like you need more support or might want to learn if anything's changed and how to write an IEP, those series courses are up and running, and we've got a great team that facilitates those. And then also we have the special education guidance linked here, just in case you want to see if anything's changed. The world of education is always changing. If you guys want to jot down my number, if you have any questions, my email is there too. Even if it doesn't pertain to prior written notice, I'm always available for support at any time. So we also have the rest of the OPI monitoring team, our school improvement team, listed here as well. We are going to open it up for questions because I saved you guys, 18 minutes to answer questions. I'm impressed.
Very nice, Mercy. Very nice. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for helping us get it all together, Anne. So great to work with you. Thank you, Valerie.
So does anybody have any experience or questions that might help others that you want to throw out there, or anything that you struggled with previously?
Not that I will help others by any means, but I have a question on those editors, just the 2 that you said not to put, like no other actions were discussed. I have a lot of parents that don't give input. And I've always put none, the parents didn't, ask any questions or, give any requests. But so what would you put in those situations?
So you can write that, Megan. You just want to detail it that, let's see how to word it, because you definitely don't want to put parent didn't say anything, right? But you could say considering all other factors in this particular circumstance, none were spoken during the meeting, or none were given during the meeting. You just definitely don't want to put NA or no other factors. Just those short blanket statements can really come back and bite a district in the butt if you're not careful about how you word them. So at least make it a sentence. I hope that's helpful. Has anybody ever had a tough situation getting a prior written notice put together, or has any of you dealt with a meeting where you've had a lot of contention, or it was a really complex meeting that you found it difficult to document all of that in a prior written notice? Angie, do you want to tell us about it?
Sure. It was when I was in Billings. And so contentious meeting as far as agreeing on services needed, compensatory ed. And so we actually ended up with our special education director doing the prior written notice to make sure that all of the parts got in there. So I was glad I was admin and not the special education teacher.
Yeah, it can be really hard when you have a lot of voices at the table too, and they're all advocating for something different for one student. That can be really hard to document. You want to try your hardest to make sure that it's positive language driven though, even if you're having a contentious meeting like that, because parents, even if it's a tough situation like that, parents deserve to know that they've got people going to bat for their kids' education, and I'm sure everybody at our table here today agrees with that and does that. It takes a lot to advocate for kiddos when there's a lot of voices trying to advocate too. So that would be my best advice. But yes, I'm glad you were an admin at the table for that one. I've been the case manager at a table for contentious meetings like that, and they are very difficult to all get on the same board and to all agree on the same things, and they can be really hard to navigate.
Yes, very much so.
Anybody else want to share anything?
Mercy, I would just add to that, maybe like when in doubt, document. It's never going to hurt to have it in there, and it might come back to you if it's excluded. So when in doubt, put it in.
Yes, that's great advice. And as monitors for the state, Alicia is on our monitoring team as well. We always give the advice to document any situation that comes about in the prior written notice. You find the editor box that fits best for the situation that you're being faced with, and you want to make sure you document it there. As we monitor files when you're on your monitoring cycle, if we can't find something, or something looks fishy, or a timeline was missed on an IEP renewal by a week, the first place we go and check is the prior written notice to see why things are goofy, or why things were missed, that in the notes section. So you have ample opportunity and places to write down those circumstances, and it's a really great practice and best practice by a long shot to make sure that you document any of those situations where you can. Especially that example of a missed timeline. You can put in there that in the prior written notice or the notes section that you tried to schedule with parents for 3 weeks and they just kept rescheduling, and they finally came a week after the renewal for the IEP, and that the timeline was lapsed, and we'll be able to see that and work with you when it comes time to monitoring. So it can really save you a lot of work in the long run. And it's great as far as if you ever get sent to due process for things, to make sure that you're documenting all your attempts, all your conversations.
So just to clarify that, if a parent cancels and you're out of timeline, you should do a prior written notice.
Yeah, you can write it in the, so when you renew the IEP, when you finally meet with them, you can write it in the prior written notice why the timeline was lapsed. You can write it in the notes section.
Okay.
Just make sure you document why. Because if there's no reason given, then it just looks like negligence on the district side. When a lot of those cases, it does end up being a scheduling conflict with parents, or you have those difficult cases where sometimes it's just hard to get parents to come in. So when in doubt, just document.
So not necessarily a new one, but in that.
Yeah, no,
okay.
not a
Perfect.
brand new prior. Yep, I see what you're saying. Nope, not a standalone prior written notice. You just want to document it in the current prior written notice. Yeah. And while we're talking about that, when you do an amendment to an IEP, you don't have to do a standalone prior written notice, but in those editor boxes, you can tab down a few, and then you can write the date of the amendment and say amendment on this date. This is what we discussed for other options, for what we proposed or refused. So make sure when you're doing an amendment IEP that you're also filling out those editors in the prior written notice. No need to do a separate one. You can just tab on down and fill that in that current one.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Keeping track in your contact log of every contact, I have several meetings that I'm having a real struggle getting parents to come in and acknowledge and get in for the meetings. And so obviously documenting every step within the contact log. Could you foresee perhaps making reference to the contact log and attaching
Yes, you could definitely do that. Yep.
Okay.
That's perfect. Yeah. Because if we are looking at your files and we don't see anything in the prior written notice or the notes section pertaining to, for our example that we're running with a missed timeline, we will go to the contact log and see if any information's inputted there.
Perfect. Okay.
That's a great question though, Julie. Yeah, you can always reference your contact log for those situations.
And Mercy, I also put in the chat box that special factors can also be explained in the prior written notice. If one of the special factors is marked, but maybe the team is feeling that it doesn't meet an IEP goal or an accommodation, you can document that the team determined and discussed whatever their determination is in the prior written notice to show that it has been considered.
Thank you, Alicia. That's a good point. So she's referencing those special factors. Does a student's behavior impede their learning or the learning of others? Things like that, or are they on a shortened school day and why? You have to address that somewhere in the IEP, but like Alicia's saying, say a student's behavior is impeding his learning because once a week he gets up and just walks out of the classroom. That does not warrant necessarily a behavior goal if the team discusses that, but they could document that under other factors in the prior written notice that the team discussed that, how it's happening in 2 settings out of 7, and these are the steps they're going to take to try to remedy that. Yeah, by all means, you can address it there if you don't feel like it warrants a goal of itself or it doesn't fit into a PLAF or anything like that. That's a great place. I'm glad you brought that up, Alicia. Thank you.
So since we're talking about those boxes of consideration of special factors, can I throw in there a question about the one which does state the student behavior impede his or her learning? I've had it explained that it needs to be checked only if it is in extreme situations. I've had it explained that if you check the box, you must have goals that follow it. If you don't check the box, but there's still goals that address behavior, that seems like it's contradictory.
Mhm.
Take me through how to know what's best when checking that box.
So let's run with our example of the kid that just gets up 2 class periods out of 7 and just walks out of the classroom. If that's not happening across all settings, then it might just be something that's happening in those 2 settings that can be easily remedied through accommodations or verbal prompts or things like that. By no means would that warrant across the board, let's monitor this in every setting type of behavior goal. Right now, if you have a kid that's getting up and they're punching kids and they're throwing chairs through windows and screaming and fighting and very combative, and that's just their school day, that kid not only would need behavior goals, but they'd probably need a functional behavior assessment as well. So you want to make sure that you're using your professional discernment on when a goal is needed and when the team can discuss it and just make accommodations per setting, right? So Alicia put a really great resource in the chat about special factors, consideration of special factors that you guys are free to look at. But my guess is if a kid has behavior goals, right, then you're correct. It would be contradictory if that box was not checked. But you do not need to have behavior goals or addressed in that manner in the IEP if it's something minor. So for instance, a real life experience I had a student that only refused work, completely silent, sat in his desk, did not do anything when he was in the speech language room. That was the only time he did that. So did I make behavior goals for him to participate across settings within like 10 minutes with 2 verbal prompts? No, I did not. But the speech path did make that a goal under the speech language goals on the MAGs because it was something she was seeing in her setting only. So you just kind of have to discern your situation and the behavior and the kid, and just do the best that you can. I hope I explained that well. I don't know if Alicia might have a different way of explaining it.
Can I summarize to make sure I understand it correctly? So
Yes.
if there are goals written that pertain to behaviors and it's across settings, the box, yes, should be checked.
Yes, if those behaviors are impeding his learning or the learnings of others or her, then yes, you would need to check that box.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you have a kid, say you have a kid that every time they go to the restroom, they unroll the toilet paper and throw it all over the restroom, would that warrant a behavior goal? What do you think, Julie?
If you have a kid throwing toilet paper in the bathroom, you would
Yeah, so
address that specifically, but not across all subjects.
Yes. So
Yeah.
if I was writing an IEP and I had one student that anytime he went to the communal bathroom, he would unroll the toilet paper and throw it around and then come back to class, I wouldn't make that a behavior goal.
No.
I would just address that on the side. I would list it under the under other factors in the prior written notice that we are addressing it as a district, but that would not warrant a behavior goal. And it wouldn't warrant checking the box either.
True. But if
Yeah.
you have a student that is refusing to do work, will, put his head down, cry, refuse. And so you're implementing strategies and trying to give outlets for that behavior across settings. That
Yes.
behavior is affecting his education.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Yep.
Perfect.
So you would check the box and you'd
Yeah.
put goals in there if it was that extreme. Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
Any other questions, you guys, or situations you want to run by?
Mercy, thank you so much. You did such a nice job today explaining prior written notice.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad. It's only my second time giving this training, so I'm glad I picked it up a little bit better than the first time I gave it. So you guys weren't my guinea pigs.
You did great. Thank you so much, Mercy. And so,
Absolutely.
if anybody has questions, Mercy provided her contact information, and you can find that on the PowerPoint with the link of other resources. So just let me know if you can't find those resource pages anymore. Otherwise, I'm going to hit stop recording. Are you